Octopath Traveler 0 is a bit different from prior entries in the series. You don't pick a character to play as. Instead, you create a custom protagonist. As such, the protagonist does not have a fixed job. Instead, they can be a warrior, merchant, thief, apothecary, hunter, cleric, scholar, or dancer. And as you progress through the game, you'll unlock access to more of these classes at once. Basically, if you get 5 skills on one class, you get to choose the next. But first, you're going to start as warrior for the prologue. After you complete the prologue, you're prompted to choose a job. Which one should you pick first? Well, don't stress the choice, because again, you get to change it after you unlock a few skills. But I think some of them are a bit better than others. So, here are the best ones to pick, in my opinion, focusing on the early game. A lot of the advice does continue on. It's good all the way to the late game, but I'm primarily focusing on the early game here, because I figure if you've already beaten the game, or you're pretty close to the end, you kind of know what you like. And I do think you should pick what you like over what's best, so you have an enjoyable time. Anyway, with that said, let's get into it. So first up, we have the Warrior, a physical DPS class. Cross Strike is a simple attack that deals sword damage. It's not particularly useful, but hey, it's not terrible. Then there's Abide, which raises your physical attack for 3 turns. This synergizes very well with many of the warrior's other skills. Spearhead swaps to your polearm and causes you to act faster next turn. I found these are of mixed usefulness. Viador has a very similar skill. If you need to go in front of certain enemies or certain party members, it's great, but sometimes you actually want your other party members to go ahead of you to either buff yourself, break or debuff an enemy, that sort of stuff. So use it with caution. Helm Cleaver lowers enemy phys defense, which is great, especially since all of these are physical attacks. Then there's Counter Posture. Counter physical attacks with a sword for 2 turns. This gives you a Retaliate. It's pretty good. Assault, deal polearm damage to all foes, more potent if attacking from the back row. This is a really cool one, and I would say the warrior's strongest skill. Not only does it deal more damage if someone else is presently in the front row and you then swap to your protagonist, but also it deals damage to all enemies. Last up, Upending Strike, deal great sword damage to a foe 2 times, higher single target damage, but since it's a multi-hit, it's not going to deal as much as a pure single target skill. For passives, you've got Peak Performance, raises potency when HP is 100%. In other words, this is why you want to be attacking from the back row with Assault. Phys Attack plus 50, Phys Defense plus 50, and last up, when you unlock everything, if you are targeted with an attribute reducing effect, raise BP recovery by 1. This is, I guess, something on boss fights, but not super useful in my opinion, especially if you're playing Assault from the back row. Next up, there's the Merchant class, and Merchant Protagonist has a lot going for them. First up, with Collect, you get additional leaves from enemies. Why is this handy? Well, whenever I got to a new town, I wanted to buy everything. But since equipment's expensive, I'd run out of money. After I started using Collect religiously, I still ran out of money. But hey, at least I could afford most of the things that I wanted. And then there's Mystic Shot, which restores SP to the entire front row based on damage done. At first, this is mediocre, but do not sleep on it, because player damage scales. SP costs are fixed, which means after you get a few levels, like 15 or so, it's functionally infinite SP from a party. And last but not least, the third skill that I want to highlight here is Arrow of Fortune. Like with Mystic Shot, it scales up, and you get more and more and more JP by doing more and more damage, which means you can progress much more quickly. I suspect this is part of why the game has felt so easy for me, because as you're unlocking 5, 6, 7 skills for characters, you get increasingly more powerful passive effects, and I unlocked a lot of those, because I got extra JP from Arrow of Fortune. So now let's go over the rest of the skills. Starting with Deadly Thrust, more easily land polearm critical hits. It's fine. Rest, restore HP and SP, pretty good already, but also curing status ailments is excellent. Many status ailments are annoying and pretty darn dangerous. Now I already covered Mystic Shot and Collect, so I'll skip over those. Piercing Thrust, deal critical polearm damage. This is why Deadly Thrust is only so-so, because you might as well just spend the extra SP and guarantee a crit. Arrow of Fortune, already covered, it's amazing, it is probably the best skill in the game. Donate BP grants 1 BP to an ally, but why would you do that when you can instead spend the BP on something like Arrow of Fortune, Collect, or Mystic Shot? Okay, there are times when it's useful, but realistically this isn't why you're playing Protagonist Merchant. Passive-wise, extra leaves. That's right, it's free money. Just don't stack it with another free money effect because it doesn't stack. Phys Defense and Ela Defense plus 50 makes you a little tankier, and then you can borrow insufficient BP for boost from the paired back ally. Yes, this means they don't gain BP next turn either, but it is totally worth it if you're nuking the boss, or collecting extra JP using Arrow of Fortune against trash mobs. Odds are that other ally isn't going to get a turn anyway, so you might as well. Next up is Protagonist Thief. Why might you play this? To steal stuff, of course. Yeah, stealing is kind of a thief's whole deal, it's in the name. But there is something to keep in mind. Rarer enemies give better loot. So, these random goons that you're seeing me steal from right now, they give lumber and similar low-value items. But stealing from elites and bosses, these grant you far more valuable items, including some mastered skills. So, whenever you're fighting an enemy, steal. You can't steal from the same enemy multiple times, but you should put some time and maybe BP into stealing what you can, especially against those more powerful foes. I do think steal alone is good enough to justify playing Protagonist Thief, but let's go over some other stuff, like HP Thief, which is stealing but with health. Since damage scales up, this is basically a full heal provided you invest some BP. Shadowbind lowers enemy speed. It's alright, I mean it's a passive debuff, but I wouldn't particularly go out of my way to use it unless the enemy is weak to dark. Level Slash, it's an AoE sword skill. A lot of early game enemies are weak to swords, so that's pretty good. SP Thief, deal damage, steal SP. Only unfortunate thing is, unlike the Mystic Shot, this only applies to the Thief, so you'll have infinite SP for your protagonist, but the rest of your party may not. Master of Shadows, deal dark damage to a foe. It's basically just Shadowbind, but it hits twice, so better for damage, worse for debuffing. Tri-Edge, deal dagger damage to a foe 3 times. It's pretty good at triple hits, but it does have a somewhat hefty SP cost. Then there's Extended Enfeeblement, which, when the equipped character inflicts an attribute-reducing effect, extend the duration by 1 turn. Since you don't have that many attribute-reducing effects baked in, you'll have to learn skills to enhance this, otherwise it's just so-so. You get some passive evasion, you get some passive speed, and then when you take physical damage, 50% chance to inflict a random status-reducing effect on a foe. Which means there's also an entirely alternative, tank playstyle that I've not experimented with, where you could force enemies to attack by learning Goad or Provoke or something like that, and then constantly retaliating as the thief is hit, using things like HP Thief to sustain through the damage. Haven't tried that yet because I don't have a mastered version of Goad. Then there's the Apothecary. You can probably guess my feelings on the Protagonist Apothecary by the fact that it's the only one I haven't unlocked yet. You start off with First Aid. This works just like all the other characters heal, and Amputation, axe damage to a foe, but it's much more expensive than Stia's version for some reason. Then in Shroud, get a chance to inflict blindness, which can be okay. Rehabilitate, grant an ally immunity from status ailments. Being able to prevent status ailment immunity is actually pretty good. That's one of the better points on Apothecary. Vivify revives an ally, kind of like an olive, except you don't have to spend money. Heal all HP regeneration to the entire front row or entire back row for 3 turns. That's pretty good. Just keep in mind, if your battles are very short, you're killing enemies in 1 round, it won't really do anything. And Crosscleave, great axe damage to a foe. For passives, improved resistances to ailments. Then raise the character's SP and max HP. Last up, you can restore SP when breaking a foe, but this does require you to break foes, so it's not going to be super consistent. More thoughts on Apothecary in the Which is the Best section, but I have thoughts. Then there's Hunter, who's kind of a beast. Stray arrows deal damage to 2 foes, or random foes 2 times. Could be the same person twice. Boomerang Toss, same thing but with an axe. Only real downside so far is relatively high SP costs. Trade Tempest, win damage to all foes. Again, good for dealing damage. Ensnare causes a foe to act last. This means it's really good for setting up on a break. Let's say Protag goes, then boss, then rest of your party, put the boss last. First shot, deal bow damage to a foe. Next attack is guaranteed to be a critical hit. If I was actively using Hunter a lot, I would definitely be doing this, because setting up for an auto crit is very nice. Hefty FP cost though. I keep saying FP because I keep thinking Dark Souls. Hefty SP. Now, Rain of Arrows is incredible. Deal bow damage to random foes 5 to 8 times. Here's the thing. If a boss is the only enemy on the field, that means hit 5 to 8 times, which is so good for breaking shields. Admittedly, they do have to be weak to bow, so it's not perfect. But in some cases, it's amazing and only has an SP cost of 12. And then there's Two-Tiered Shot, which not only does it do very solid damage, it also hits 4 times, and it's kind of delayed. You hit twice, then move to a back row, putting someone else in the action, and hit 2 more times when the turn ends. So because of this, I would say that the Hunter is a very strong DPS option. Hunter also has an excellent passive, Extra Experience. Receive additional EXP at the end of battle. This is something that you absolutely want if you're trying to stay ahead of the EXP curve. Invigorating Break. Restore HP when breaking a foe. Since you already excel at break due to multi-hit attacks, this is pretty good. Then you can get 50 crit. It won't be super consistent, but hey, it's free damage, and everyone loves free damage. Last up, at the end of a turn, the equipped character will unleash a special attack with their equipped weapon from the back row. In other words, when you use 2-tiered shot to go into the back row, you now get an additional attack. So yeah, pretty damn good, but you do need to unlock all 7 skills to gain that bonus. Next we have Protagonist Cleric. Heal Wounds restores the HP of the entire front row or back row. It's an AoE heal, and it only costs twice as much as a single target heal. That's pretty darn efficient. Holy Light, light damage. It's good for light weakness foes. Brain Bash, it's a little extra damage on either of your weapons, though physical attack on a Cleric's kind of mediocre, so this is not great. Sacred Flame's Protection grants an ally a small chance to prevent enemy attacks for 2 turns. I'm not entirely sure what small means here, but basically don't count on it. It's still pretty good, especially on a tank who's going to survive the attacks anyway. Light of Judgment, it's a pretty hard-hitting single-target light skill, and it's probably going to be one of the only hard-hitting single-target light skills that you'll have for about the first 20 hours of the game. Celestial Veil, grant an ally the ability to restore SP equivalent to 3% of damage taken for 2 turns. Really good on tanks, or anyone who likes taking damage. And Wondrous Veil is a cheat death effect, where if the ally that you cast this on is incapacitated, aka KO'd in battle, they will automatically recover. So you spend some SP now to get that effect later. It is very good on bosses, and it is a unique effect that your other early game healers won't have. For passives, you get the HP recovery up, which you might recognize from the prologue, raise the amount of HP restored and HP regeneration effects. You get some free Ellie defense, some max XP, and you get that cheat death chance to not be incapacitated for yourself as well. This way you have it on 2 characters, basically guaranteed from the start, because why wouldn't you cast that? Next up we have Protagonist Scholar, who's no Cyrus, but is still pretty darn good. First up, you have Study Foe, which automatically reveals 1 weakness at the start of battle. This is especially nice when you're just dealing with trash mobs and you want to get the fight over quickly. Against a boss, there's plenty of time to manually analyze or experiment with different hits. Against trash, you just want it done before they even get a turn, so knowing where to hit them that hurts and potentially break them immediately definitely helps. Also, like classic Scholar from other Octopath games, all your skills are AoEs and primarily focused on dealing damage. In this case, the elements of choice are Fire, Wind, and Light, which does actually round out your party really well, especially in the early game. And there's a hit everything once and hit everything twice version. Since you also get Alexia fairly early on, at least provided that you start with the Fame Path, or at the very least do Chapter 1 of a Fame Path early, I wouldn't say it is required to play Protagonist Scholar. But I also wouldn't say that the 2 are mutually exclusive. You can totally have Protagonist Scholar and Alexia in your party and do pretty darn well, since she has Lightning and Dark, and Protagonist has Fire, Light, and Wind. Now for passives, there's Study Foe, which is the auto-analyze I mentioned earlier. Elemental Attack plus 50. Status effects are not removed when incapacitated. Pretty mediocre passive so far, but at the end of a turn, raise the equipped character's elemental attack and defense for 2 turns when in the back row. So if you're actively swapping with a partner, either because they have swap skills or just because you're doing it manually, this is very good. Then last but not least, we have Protagonist Dancer. First up, Line Dance. Raise the phys attack of an ally for 2 turns. Combined with Wild Strike, where you deal fan damage, which is a pretty okay offensive skill, but let's be honest, you're playing a Dancer for the buffs, so that's what I'm going to focus on. Next up, there is Coney Caper, which raises evasion of an ally. So you have offense and you have defense. Evasion is a chance to completely evade damage. It's pretty good. Frosty Refrain, deal some ice damage. Peacock Strut, raise elemental attack. Quite good, especially if combined with someone like Alexia. Porcupine Stomp, raise elemental defense. I really wish this was AoE, as on some bosses I really want everyone to have it. Then Triple Arc, deal fan damage. Again, probably not why you're playing this character, or I should say this job, but it doesn't hurt to have in your back pocket, especially if you need to break. Now, I have not played the Dancer very much because I have another Dancer that I like quite a bit, so I have not experimented too much with some of the support effects. But the first one is very strong, which is when the equipped character grants an attribute raising effect, extend the duration by 1 turn. This seems like something that is very good to master and put on all of your other buff characters. Then additional JP at the end of battle, similar to the Merchant, but not quite as good. Speed plus 50 helps to act first, and at the start of a battle restore 1 BP, which is nice on short fights but doesn't have a very big effect on long fights because it is only 1 BP in total. And so which one's the best? Well, first up, quick disclaimer, this is just my opinion based on my experiences with the game. Someone else might have a completely different opinion. But I think the Merchant's the best. Why? Well, first of all, I like having infinite SP. So I can use Mystic Arrow, and then I can hit any hard-hitting nuke. Things that cost like 30 SP, it doesn't matter. I will get all of that SP back the next time I cast Mystic Arrow. Second of all, collect. Why? Because I want to buy all the things, and things are really expensive, so I need more money. The passive for extra money is pretty good too. If this is the only reason, yes, later there are recruitable merchants like Tressa, who you might remember if you played the original Octopath, but Arrow of Fortune is completely insane. And I've been using this to grind out JP because the other thing I want is more skills on more of my characters. This is why in the first third of the game, I had skills that required 800 and 1500 JP to unlock because I had that much JP, which I will admit I did like a half hour of grinding at one point because I really wanted to unlock extra protagonist stuff. But aside of that, I have not been grinding. I've just been playing through the game, doing main story, doing side story, completing stuff, and yet I have so much JP because I was just spamming Arrow of Fortune. So yeah, that is why I put Merchant at number 1. But there are a couple other classes I want to talk about because I think they have merit. The first of which is Thief. This is because you can steal stuff. The only reason that I don't put Thief equal to Merchant is there are alternatives, like the Aber's Artifice Ultimate, which you get when you complete the Path of Fame. Because there are alternatives here, I don't think it's quite as strong. I don't remember any way to get Arrow of Fortune in the early game, but if there is one that I simply missed, please let me know down in the comments below, because then I'd say it's Merchant or Thief, up to you. Also, Scholar's pretty fun. Being a big fan of Cyrus from the original, I swapped to Scholar for quite a bit. Yes, I noticed the loss of SP, but I also noticed that I could hit enemies very hard, and it was very, very good to be able to just nuke trash mobs with double AoE from multiple classes. That said, I actually think Alexia is the stronger Scholar as you continue to level her. The Protagonist Scholar gets 1 weak point revealed at the start of combat, which is really good against weaker enemies. But Alexia, once you unlock 7 skills on her, gets 1 weak point revealed every time she acts, which is really good for elites and bosses, i.e. the more challenging fights. So, between the two, I decided to go with Alexia. Then there's the Hunter, who is a solid single target damage dealer, and Rain of Arrows is particularly nice, because again, you get to hit stuff way too many times. But early game, there are 2 other Hunters in Fen and Deletitia. They don't do the same thing. They do not have a Rain of Arrows, they can't hit like 5 times per turn consistently, but I also didn't want to have a different Hunter and also my Protagonist, and I didn't want to bench both of the Hunters. So, I would consider Hunter a runner-up. I certainly would not blame you if you played Hunter Protagonist instead. I also wouldn't blame you if you played Cleric Protagonist instead. It's just that the game throws multiple healers at you early on, so I went with them instead. I would also like to highlight a worst pick in the Apothecary. Why? The game throws healers, both Macy and Stia, early on. Then you get a Dancer who also has healing and SP recovery once you complete the Path of Fame. That means you have 3 healing/support options pretty early in your quest. And I think if you want to go support Protagonist, either Cleric or Dancer are the better choices here. Yes, Apothecary has Revive, but also Cleric has a cheat death, kind of the same thing but a little better, and Olive of Life isn't that expensive. And so that's about it. Oh wait, no it's not, I didn't talk about Warrior. I didn't talk about Warrior because I don't think Warrior stands out as a great choice, nor is Warrior a bad choice. Warrior simply is. Pick it if you want, otherwise don't. And so, those are my thoughts on the best protagonist class in Octopath Traveler 0. While this was primarily focused on the early game, I wasn't, for example, factoring in the fact that you can borrow skills and passives from other classes and mix and match, It gets way more interesting as you do, but also you spend a good 30 hours in the game before that unlocks. Plus or minus a little bit depending on how quickly you go. And so I wanted to provide some options for the early game, as I think as you get into the game more, especially at the later points, you kind of have enough figured out to at least know what you like, even if you don't necessarily know what the best is. And my experience of the game so far has been such that I don't think anyone should feel the need to play the best or the strongest if they're not enjoying it. Go with what you like, you'll do fine. Yes, it might mean occasionally you'll have to redo a boss fight because you're a little weaker, but ultimately you'll be okay, you'll get through it. Just stock up on your consumables and make sure you pick other party members that complement your protagonist's skills. And so that's it. I'm curious, what is your favorite class from Octopath Traveler 0? So far, it definitely was the merchant for me because I do like the min-max aspect. I do like getting the extra resources and the extra power. But the hunter with all the multi-hit skills is pretty darn cool, and there's something that's just very satisfying about nuking enemies as a scholar. Luckily, I have other hunters and other scholars who can do similar things, so I've been perfectly happy to mostly play merchant on my main character. That said, as you unlock more, you can just swap anytime, so there are points where I was like, you know, I really need a scholar right now, and so I swapped to Protagonist Scholar. But anyway, with that said, I'm going to get going for now, but thank you very much for watching to the end. If you enjoyed, do be sure to leave a like. Also, get subscribed. That way, you'll see more updates on Octopath Traveler 0, as I have some other thoughts on the game and might be making future guides. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.